Every day you face invisible battles. The temptation to give up when things get difficult. The urge to react angrily when provoked. The pull toward comfort when growth requires discomfort. The question isn't whether you're fighting battles. It's whether you're winning them. At 3 a.m, Carlos Rodriguez sits in his home office staring at a resignation letter he's written and rewritten 12 times. His boss has been undermining him for months, taking credit for his ideas and publicly questioning his competence. Every instinct screams at Carlos to march into the office tomorrow and tell his boss exactly what he thinks, to fight fire with fire, to stand up for himself in the most dramatic way possible. But Carlos has been studying Stoic philosophy for the past year, and he recognizes this moment as what Marcus Aurelius would call the battlefield of the mind. The real war isn't between Carlos and his boss. It's between his reactive impulses and his strategic wisdom. Between his wounded ego and his long-term values. Between the person he is when provoked and the person he wants to become under pressure. Instead of surrendering to his anger or typing an emotional email that would destroy his career, Carlos applies what the ancient Stoics called warrior discipline. Not the discipline of physical combat, but the much more challenging discipline of self-mastery. He asks himself the questions that separate warriors from mere reactors. What response would serve my highest good? How can I maintain my integrity while protecting my interests? What would courage look like in this situation, as opposed to mere aggression? This is the essence of what it means to be a modern-day warrior in the Stoic tradition. It's not about conquering others, accumulating power, or winning external battles. It's about developing the inner strength to respond rather than react, to choose your battles wisely, and to maintain your character under pressure. It's about understanding that the most important victories happen in the quiet moments when no one is watching. When you choose growth over comfort, truth over convenience, and virtue over immediate gratification. The ancient Stoics, many of whom were actual soldiers and leaders, understood that physical courage was relatively common compared to moral courage. It's easier to face an external enemy than to confront your own laziness. Easier to fight for your country than to fight against your own bad habits. Easier to defend your position than to admit when you're wrong and change course. Epictetus, who had experienced both physical slavery and philosophical freedom, taught that true warriors are those who have learned to govern themselves. He understood that external circumstances, whether chains, poverty, or social rejection, could only imprison the body, but that we imprison our own souls through mental habits of victimhood, resentment, and reactive thinking. This internal warfare is more complex and demanding than external conflict because the enemy knows all your weaknesses, operates from within your own mind, and never takes a day off. Your laziness knows exactly when you're most vulnerable to giving up. Your anger knows precisely which buttons to push to make you lose your composure. Your fear understands how to disguise itself as reasonable caution or practical wisdom. The warrior's path in Stoicism begins with recognizing that these internal enemies are not you. They are patterns of thinking and reacting that you've developed over time, often as survival mechanisms that once served you, but now hold you back. The person who gets defensive when criticized develop that reaction to protect themselves from harm. The individual who procrastinates learn to avoid difficult tasks as a way of avoiding potential failure. The one who people pleases discovered that compliance could prevent conflict, But what once protected us often becomes our prison. The defensive reactions that once shielded us from criticism now prevent us from learning and growing. The avoidance that once saved us from failure now keeps us from attempting anything meaningful. The compliance that once kept us safe now makes us strangers to our own values and desires. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his tent during military campaigns, captured this perfectly when he noted that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that most of our battles are with phantoms of our own creation. The warrior's first task is learning to distinguish between real threats that require action and imaginary threats that exist only in our anxious projections. Consider Sarah Kim, a project manager who discovered this distinction during a particularly stressful product launch. For weeks, Sarah had been consumed by anxiety about every possible thing that could go wrong. Equipment failures, team conflicts, budget overruns, market rejection. She was fighting dozens of battles simultaneously, all of them in her mind, all of them against scenarios that hadn't happened and might never happen. When Sarah applied Stoic warrior principles to her situation, she realized that her mental energy was being frittered away on imaginary battles while the real challenges, team communication, resource allocation, and stakeholder alignment, weren't getting her full attention. She learned to ask herself, is this happening now, or am I fighting a battle with my own projections? This question became Sarah's tactical weapon against anxiety and overwhelm. When she caught herself spiraling into worst-case scenarios, she would return to the present moment and ask, what actual challenge is in front of me right now? And what's the most effective response I can make? This shift from fighting imaginary battles to addressing real challenges transformed both her effectiveness and her peace of mind. The Stoic concept of warriorhood also challenges our culture's association of strength with aggression and dominance. True strength, according to the Stoics, is demonstrated not by overpowering others but by maintaining your principles under pressure. Not by winning arguments, but by seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable. Not by never feeling fear, but by acting courageously despite fear. This reframe is particularly relevant in our current cultural moment, where strength is often confused with stubbornness, confidence with arrogance, and leadership with domination. The Stoic warrior understands that real power comes from self-control, rather than control over others, that true confidence emerges from competence and character rather than bravado, and that authentic leadership serves others rather than serving the ego. The ancient Stoics identified 4 primary battlefields where the modern warrior must prove their mettle, none of which involve external conflict with other people. These internal battlefields are where character is forged, where true strength is developed, and where the most important victories of a human life are won or lost. The first battlefield is the war against immediate gratification. In our culture of instant everything, instant communication, instant entertainment, instant delivery, we've largely lost the capacity for what the Stoics called delayed gratification, or temporal wisdom. This is the ability to choose long-term benefit over short-term pleasure, to invest in the future rather than consuming in the present. This battle plays out hundreds of times each day in seemingly small decisions. Choosing to exercise when you'd rather relax, eating nutritious food when you crave junk, working on important projects when you'd prefer to scroll social media, having difficult conversations when you'd rather avoid conflict, saving money when you'd rather spend it on immediate pleasures. Each of these moments is a micro-battle in the larger war for self-sovereignty. The person who consistently chooses the harder but more beneficial option is training what the Stoics called the muscle of virtue. Like physical exercise, these choices compound over time, creating strength that serves you in increasingly challenging situations. Let me tell you about David Park, a software developer who transformed his entire life by understanding this principle. David had developed a pattern of choosing immediate comfort over long-term growth in virtually every area of his life. He would stay up late watching television instead of getting adequate sleep, order takeout instead of cooking healthy meals, avoid challenging projects at work, and postpone difficult conversations in his relationships. David's turning point came when he realized that these seemingly unrelated choices were actually part of the same pattern, a consistent surrender in the daily battles for self-discipline. He began treating each moment of choice as what he called character training, asking himself, what would the person I want to become do in this situation? This simple question helped David recognize that he was either strengthening or weakening his character with every decision. When he chose to go to bed early despite wanting to watch another episode, he was training the discipline that would help him wake up early for morning workouts. When he chose to cook at home despite the convenience of delivery, he was practicing the same self-control that would help him save money and stick to his health goals. The transformation wasn't immediate or dramatic, but it was cumulative. As David won more of these daily micro-battles, he developed confidence in his ability to keep commitments to himself. This self-trust became the foundation for larger changes. Pursuing a promotion that required learning new skills, ending a relationship that had become comfortable but unfulfilling, and starting the side business he had talked about for years. The second battlefield is the war against reactive emotions. The Stoics understood that emotions themselves aren't the enemy. Anger, fear, sadness, and even joy contain important information about our values and circumstances. The problem arises when we become slaves to these emotions, allowing them to dictate our responses without conscious choice. The warrior's task isn't to eliminate emotions, but to develop what Marcus Aurelius called emotional sovereignty. The ability to feel emotions fully while maintaining rational choice about how to respond. This requires understanding the difference between experiencing an emotion and being controlled by it. Consider Jennifer Walsh, a team leader who struggled with anger management in high-stress situations. When projects fell behind schedule or team members made mistakes, Jennifer would react with immediate frustration, often saying things she later regretted, and creating a tense work environment that actually made problems worse. Jennifer's breakthrough came when she learned to recognize anger as information rather than instruction. Instead of automatically expressing her frustration, she began asking herself, "What is this anger telling me about the situation? What response would actually improve things rather than just releasing my tension?" This pause between feeling and reacting became Jennifer's secret weapon. She discovered that her anger was often signaling important issues. Unrealistic deadlines, unclear communication, or insufficient resources, but that her reactive responses were preventing her from addressing these root causes effectively. By treating anger as data rather than directive, Jennifer became more effective as both a leader and a problem solver. The third battlefield is the war against external validation dependency. Our culture has created an epidemic of people who derive their sense of worth primarily from others' opinions, approval, or recognition. This external dependency makes us vulnerable to manipulation, prevents authentic self-expression, and creates chronic anxiety about maintaining others' good opinion. The Stoic warrior develops what we might call internal scorecard. The ability to evaluate your actions based on your own values and standards rather than others' reactions. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of feedback, but rather developing the wisdom to distinguish between useful input and mere opinion, between constructive criticism and projection. This battle is particularly challenging in our social media age, where external validation is gamified through likes, shares, and comments. The warrior learns to ask, am I sharing this because it's authentic and valuable, or because I'm seeking approval? Am I making this decision based on my values or on what I think others expect? The fourth battlefield is the war against comfort zone stagnation. Human beings are wired to seek safety and predictability, which served our ancestors well in dangerous environments. But in our relatively safe modern world, this same instinct often prevents us from growing, learning, and developing our full potential. The Stoic warrior deliberately chooses discomfort in service of growth. This might mean taking on challenging projects that stretch your abilities, having conversations that feel awkward but necessary, or pursuing goals that require you to develop new skills and face potential failure. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this as the discipline of action, choosing to engage with life fully despite uncertainty and risk rather than retreating into the false safety of the familiar. He understood that comfort might feel safe, but it's actually the most dangerous place to remain because it prevents the growth that makes us capable of handling life's inevitable challenges. But here's what distinguishes the Stoic approach from mere self-punishment or reckless risk-taking. The warrior chooses discomfort strategically, not randomly. They push themselves in directions that align with their values and long-term goals, not just for the sake of being uncomfortable. This strategic approach to growth requires what the Stoics called practical wisdom, the ability to distinguish between beneficial discomfort that promotes development and unnecessary suffering that serves no constructive purpose. The warrior embraces the discomfort of discipline, honest self-examination, and courageous action while avoiding the suffering that comes from resentment, comparison, and attachment to outcomes beyond their control. The development of warrior consciousness requires specific training methods that the Stoics refined over centuries of practice. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts, but practical techniques for building the mental and emotional strength necessary to navigate modern challenges with wisdom and courage. The first training method is what we might call voluntary hardship. Deliberately choosing temporary discomfort to build resilience and reduce attachment to comfort. Seneca would periodically live as if he were poor, sleeping on hard surfaces, eating simple food, and wearing basic clothing. This wasn't masochism but preparation, training his mind to remain calm and resourceful regardless of external circumstances. Modern applications of this principle might include taking cold showers to build tolerance for discomfort, fasting occasionally to reduce dependency on constant consumption, walking instead of driving when possible to maintain physical capability, or deliberately choosing the more challenging option when the easier path would work just as well. The key is choosing these hardships consciously and temporarily, with clear purpose rather than arbitrary suffering. The goal is to expand your comfort zone and prove to yourself that you can handle more difficulty than you might think, while reducing the fear and anxiety that come from believing you need specific conditions to be okay. Take the example of Maria Santos, a marketing executive who was terrified of public speaking but whose career advancement required presentation skills. Instead of avoiding speaking opportunities or relying on anxiety medication, Maria applied the principle of voluntary hardship by deliberately seeking out low-stakes speaking situations, joining a local Toastmasters club, volunteering to give presentations at community meetings, and even practicing difficult conversations with friends and family. Each voluntary exposure to the discomfort of public speaking reduced its power over her while building actual competence. By the time Maria needed to present to senior leadership at her company, she had already faced her fear dozens of times in less critical situations. The voluntary hardship had transformed a paralyzing weakness into a genuine strength. The second training method is perspective discipline. Regularly practicing different ways of viewing challenging situations to maintain emotional balance and strategic thinking. The Stoics understood that our perspective on events often matters more than the events themselves, and that we can consciously choose more empowering and accurate ways of interpreting our experiences. This might involve asking questions like, how will this matter in 10 years? What would someone I admire do in this situation? What opportunity might be hidden within this challenge? How is this experience preparing me for something important? What would I tell a friend facing this same situation? The goal isn't positive thinking or denial, but flexible thinking. The ability to see situations from multiple angles and choose the perspective that enables the most constructive response. This training is particularly valuable during setbacks, conflicts, or periods of uncertainty when our default perspective might be catastrophic or victim-oriented. Consider Robert Chen, a small business owner whose company was struggling during an economic downturn. Robert's initial perspective was victim-focused. The economy is destroying my business. I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. This isn't fair. This perspective, while understandable, generated hopelessness and reactive desperation that clouded his judgment. When Robert applied perspective discipline, he began asking different questions. What is this situation teaching me about business resilience? How can I use this challenge to identify which aspects of my business model are truly essential? What opportunities might emerge for companies that survive this downturn? How can I support my employees and customers during this difficult time? This shift in perspective didn't change Robert's external circumstances, but it transformed his internal experience from victimhood to agency. Instead of panicking or giving up, he began making strategic decisions about which parts of his business to preserve, which relationships to invest in, and which new opportunities to explore. The business did survive the downturn, and Robert credited the perspective discipline with preventing him from making fear-based decisions that would have made recovery impossible. The third training method is decision rehearsal, mentally practicing how you want to respond to likely challenges before they occur. Marcus Aurelius would begin each day by imagining potential difficulties and preparing his responses. Not to become pessimistic, but to avoid being caught off guard by ordinary human problems. This practice builds what psychologists call implementation intentions, pre-decided responses to specific situations that help us act according to our values even under pressure. Instead of hoping we'll respond wisely in the heat of the moment, we prepare our responses in advance when we can think clearly and access our best judgment. Practical applications might include deciding how you'll respond if someone criticizes your work, preparing your reaction if you receive bad news, planning how you'll handle the temptation to give up when pursuing difficult goals, or rehearsing how you'll maintain your values if pressured to compromise them. The fourth training method is virtue inventory, regularly assessing which virtues you're developing and which need more attention. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Each day offers opportunities to practice these virtues in small ways that build capacity for larger challenges. Wisdom might be practiced by seeking to understand before seeking to be understood in conversations. Courage could be developed by speaking up for someone being treated unfairly or pursuing a goal despite fear of failure. Justice might involve giving credit where it's due or admitting when you're wrong. Temperance could be practiced by saying no to good opportunities that don't align with your priorities. The warrior tracks these micro-practices like an athlete tracks their training, recognizing that character development requires the same consistency and attention as physical fitness. This isn't about perfectionism, but about intentional growth and honest self-assessment. Let me share the story of Andrea Lopez, a project manager who used virtue inventory to transform her leadership style. Andrea realized that while she was naturally good at the virtue of temperance, staying calm under pressure and maintaining work-life balance, she struggled with courage when it came to giving difficult feedback or challenging unrealistic expectations from superiors. Andrea began treating courage like a skill she needed to develop, looking for small opportunities to practice brave honesty. She started giving more direct feedback in one-on-one meetings, asking clarifying questions when project requirements seemed unclear, and respectfully pushing back when deadlines seemed unrealistic. Each small act of courage built Andrea's confidence and competence in this area. Over time, she became known as someone who could be trusted to speak honestly about project realities, which made her more valuable to her organization and more effective as a leader. The virtue inventory helped her identify a specific area for growth and develop it systematically. The fifth training method is philosophical immunity, developing the mental antibodies that protect you from toxic thinking patterns, manipulative influences, and cultural pressures that undermine your values and judgment. Just as physical immune systems protect us from harmful bacteria and viruses, philosophical immunity protects us from harmful ideas and social influences. This involves learning to recognize and resist common thinking errors like catastrophizing, personalizing events beyond your control, assuming others' motivations, or believing that your worth depends on external achievements. It also means developing resistance to cultural messages that promote comparison, materialism, or victim consciousness. The ultimate test of warrior development isn't how you perform during times of ease and success, but how you maintain your character and effectiveness during periods of genuine difficulty, uncertainty, and loss. This is when the daily practices of self-discipline, perspective training, and virtue development prove their worth or reveal their limitations. The Stoic concept of the warrior reaches its highest expression in what Marcus Aurelius called grace under pressure, the ability to remain calm, thoughtful, and principled even when everything seems to be falling apart. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending that difficulties don't matter, but about maintaining access to your best judgment and highest values regardless of external circumstances. Consider the extraordinary example of Stockdale's principles in action. But let me share a more contemporary story that illustrates the same principle. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an emergency room physician, discovered the power of warrior consciousness during the early months of the pandemic when her hospital was overwhelmed. Resources were scarce, and she was working 18-hour shifts while worrying about bringing the virus home to her family. Elena's initial response was understandable human stress. Anxiety about her safety, anger at inadequate protective equipment, exhaustion from impossible demands, and fear for her patients' outcomes. But Elena had been studying Stoic philosophy for several years, and she recognized this crisis as the ultimate test of everything she had been practicing in smaller challenges. Instead of being overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation, Elena applied warrior principles systematically. She focused entirely on what remained within her control: her preparation, her attention to each patient, her communication with colleagues, her adherence to safety protocols. She released attachment to outcomes she couldn't influence while maximizing her effectiveness in areas where her actions mattered. Most importantly, Elena used the crisis as an opportunity to practice virtue at the highest level. When colleagues became overwhelmed, she offered support and encouragement. When difficult decisions had to be made about resource allocation, she advocated for fairness and transparency. When her own fear threatened to cloud her judgment, she returned to her core purpose of serving others through skilled medical care. Elena later reflected that the pandemic period, despite its difficulty, became one of the most meaningful and growth-producing times of her career. The warrior training she had practiced during ordinary challenges prepared her to maintain her character and effectiveness during extraordinary circumstances. This illustrates a crucial principle of warrior development. We don't rise to the level of our aspirations during crisis. We fall to the level of our training. The person who practices integrity in small matters will maintain integrity under great pressure. The individual who develops emotional regulation during minor frustrations will remain calm during major setbacks. The one who chooses growth over comfort in daily decisions will find strength during periods of genuine hardship. But becoming a modern-day warrior isn't just about personal resilience. It's about developing the capacity to serve others from a place of strength rather than neediness. When we've conquered our own reactivity, we can offer calm presence to others who are struggling. When we've developed courage in our own lives, we can inspire courage in others. When we've learned to find meaning in difficulty, we can help others discover purpose in their challenges. This service-oriented aspect of warrior consciousness distinguishes it from mere self-improvement or personal development. The Stoic warrior understands that individual strength is meaningful primarily when it contributes to the common good. Marcus Aurelius didn't develop his philosophical discipline just for personal satisfaction. He used it to serve the Roman people more effectively. Epictetus didn't overcome the trauma of slavery just for his own healing. He used his insights to teach others how to find freedom regardless of their circumstances. In our contemporary context, This might mean using your emotional regulation skills to create calm spaces for others during conflict, applying your courage to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, utilizing your discipline to model what's possible when someone commits to growth, or sharing your perspective-taking abilities to help others find hope during difficult times. The question that every developing warrior must answer is this: how will I use the strength I'm building to contribute to something larger than myself? The answer doesn't have to be grandiose or public. It might be as simple as being the person your family can count on during crisis, the colleague who maintains integrity when others compromise, the friend who listens without judgment, or the community member who volunteers their skills for causes they believe in. As we conclude this exploration of modern warrior consciousness, remember that this path is not about perfection but about direction. Every day offers new opportunities to practice the skills we've discussed, choosing long-term benefit over immediate gratification, responding rather than reacting to provocations, building competence through voluntary challenge, maintaining your values under pressure. The victories won't always be visible or recognized by others. Most of your greatest triumphs will happen in private moments when you choose growth over comfort, truth over convenience, service over selfishness. These quiet victories accumulate over time, building the kind of character strength that enables you to navigate whatever challenges life presents with dignity and purpose. The ancient Stoics proved that it's possible to develop unshakable inner strength without becoming hard or closed-hearted, to build personal resilience while remaining compassionate toward others, to pursue excellence without becoming obsessed with external recognition. They showed us that the highest form of warrior consciousness isn't about conquering others, but about conquering the parts of ourselves that prevent us from becoming who we're capable of being. In a world that often confuses aggression with strength, reaction with action, and busyness with purpose, the path of the warrior offers something different. The quiet confidence that comes from self-knowledge, the calm strength that emerges from self-discipline, and the generous spirit that flows from inner fullness rather than external need. If this exploration of warrior consciousness without warfare resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more insights into how ancient wisdom can guide modern living. Remember that you already have everything you need to begin this warrior's journey. It starts with the next choice you make, the next challenge you face, and the next opportunity to choose who you want to become under pressure. The battlefield is within you. The training is available right now, and the victory is measured not by what you defeat, but by what you become in the process of growing stronger. Until next time, remember that true warriors are made not in the heat of external battle, but in the quiet moments when they choose to fight for their own highest potential.